Washington, once again, 52-42 over USC. We're live.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. And thank you for making this not your first watch or first listen of the day, because, you know, it's late at night, so we appreciate you bearing with us here. But you know us. We write for Inside the Huskies with Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Lars, we were doing some final prep work just a second ago when our guy T-Dog425 was like, hey, you guys here? You guys starting? And it's because we were raving about Dillon Johnson and how much we love him and how happy we are just for him, not only as a football player, because he's a fantastic football player, but just as a person as well. So do you want to just take that away and continue our conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of funny that my bold prediction was 130 total yards, and he had 150 rushing yards. Or actually, it was 104 at the first half, 117.
Yeah, something like that.
So, but the fact that he was over 100 yards in the first half, and again, we don't want to bring up Alex Grinch not being at a defense and things like that, because really, because that is certainly a part of it, right? Like, it's not like they were running against Alabama or, Georgia. There wasn't that great of a defense, but also you still have to execute when your number is called, right? It's kind of like the cliche of everyone saying, hey, well, you can steal somebody's signs and still get blown off the ball. It's like, right. So you still got to execute the play and do everything like that. But we've been I've been clamoring for Dillon Johnson to get his consistent carries, not just, hey, two carries back to back, and then we're going to go 7 passes to Penix. It's like, please just stop. Just let Dillon get into a rhythm, let the offensive line set the tone, and let Mike be the chef that he can be when he needs to be. But really, this was a game where, especially to control the clock, to control the tempo of the game, it didn't mean you had to take the ball out of Mike's hands. And yeah, he had 250, 260, and 2 touchdowns. It wasn't a greatest game, but yet as I wrote on Inside the Huskies, or as I'm writing on Inside the Huskies, it'll be up later, Penix still got his signature Heisman moment. So it wasn't that he didn't need to have a great, incredible game. He just had to have that one signature play that said, hey, you know what? That was special. That play is going to now propel them through the rest of the season. And speaking to the people below, absolutely. I mean, another player, ZTF, which I know you wrote about on Inside the Huskies, talking about, I mean, I remember asking Eric Schmidt on Wednesday, just again, I'm not trying to pry, but just how's Zion doing? How is he handling this? And I think the one thing the coaches all kind of knew was, well, and Zion kind of touched on it with Softy after the game where he said, my dad would have wanted me out there. And now some people say, well, how could you play? It's like, well, when your parents raise you a certain way and they basically are involved in your athletic life, saying, hey, we're going to drive you to practice. We're going to get you to this. We're going to get this so you can always play no matter what. Even if I got to work, even if your parents got to go to work, we are still going to make sure you're going to play on Friday night. There's no different on Saturday and there's no different on Sunday. Now, there are rare, circumstances where some people might say, hey, I need to be away from the team for this particular reason or whatever, but I think it's really more symbolic, especially Zion touched on it tonight where yes, he gets the offsides early, but then he gets the strip sack that changes the game in the second half. Right. And so I think that there's people can say, oh well, hey, Zion didn't have his greatest game. Okay, nobody had their greatest game tonight. I'm sorry, when it's 52-42, nobody had a great game. Yes, you could say the offense did, but it's like
actually I do have an interesting Jabbar Muhammad stat that I kind of noticed in the moment.
Interesting,
we'll save it for the second half.
But the point, with nothing against that stat, but Jabbar Muhammad didn't have a pick or a turnover tonight, so it's a matter of
I'll tell you why.
Exactly, but the point is having Zion. He got robbed against Michigan State to finally kind of had the crescendoing moment tonight against USC, and he gets a win, makes up for the offsides. Everything that we've been saying, where it just feels like this is Washington's year, right? And it's one of those cliches where it's like, oh, anybody could say that. It's right. Like, look at the breaks this team has gotten, look at the timely plays this team has made. It's really more of the latter, right? It's not they haven't necessarily gotten the breaks all the time, but what the throw to Devin Culp that I wrote about on Inside the Huskies, Dillon Johnson having his breakout game, Jabbar, Zion, multiple players making plays where maybe it wasn't consistently for 4 quarters, but Voight Tanufi, my God,
Tanufi made a fantastic play.
When you need a sack at the end of the game, Voight was not letting Caleb Williams go. It's like, no. I've seen Washington defenses give up this one before. This team came back for a reason, and tonight kind of showed why.
No, absolutely. And then you can look at the other side of the ball too, right? 2 guys you didn't mention, and I know not by like disrespect or anything, but Jalen Polk and Rome Odunze. They still made plays when their number was called. They looked fantastic. And then another guy who I noted it in a tweet, and something I'm very curious to ask the coaches about a little bit later in the week, is there were a couple plays when it was getting down to like just brass tacks, like late third, early fourth quarter. And who was the running back in the game after Dillon Johnson went out? It was Tybo Rogers. It wasn't Will Nixon. It wasn't Sam Adams. It was the freshman, Tybo Rogers. And that was really interesting. That was something that you really like to see. And I think that's really interesting personally. But one thing that I wanted to touch on that you said a little bit earlier is because I know the thing you're writing on Inside the Huskies talks about, is this Michael Penix's signature Heisman moment, right? That roll out to the left and that fantastic throw where Devin Culp made just a spectacular play on the ball. But I think that might be one of the plays that, he's going to be in New York. They're going to show that on his highlight reel early in the year. I think that's going to be the second play they show. Number 1, the touchdown against Oregon, the game winner, right? And then number 2, I think it's that play right there. I truly do.
See, ironically, I had him inverted because here's the thing. As I was writing about it, I thought, okay, well, when you break down the play that they won against Oregon, it was good. It was impactful, but it wasn't a Heisman moment because they left so much time on the clock. It was a one-on-one coverage. It was first of all, if Roman Dunze doesn't catch that against Oregon, that's a crime. Like, he had no business in backup coverage with 1-on-1 against nobody else. There's no way Rome doesn't catch that 9 out of 10 times. The only time he does is
more the moment than anything else, though, is my point.
But even still, I see what you're saying. But even more so because there was so much time left. I think if the difference is, and I know we're kind of splitting hairs here, but if Camden Lewis doesn't even have a chance to kick it, or if you go back to the Alamo Bowl against Texas where Quinn Ewers has got to throw a Hail Mary full of grace loaded with thee, at the end of the game with 15 seconds left, that's a different setup than Bo Nix being able to drive and put Oregon in position to push it into overtime versus tonight, that throw. I truly do. You know what? Mike is going to say he threw Devin open on that just because I know Penix and having asked him that question multiple times post game before, I know is what he's going to say.
True.
But go back and watch that. There's no way he saw that happening. There's no what. But here's why it's a Heisman moment, regardless of who he was throwing it to. He threw it in the place where either somebody on Washington is going to have a chance at catching it, or it's going out of bounds. Like you could, because Eric Gentry, the USC linebacker, was still coming over and kind of slow walked it almost a bit in coverage. Overshot, I believe, Jalen Polk in the kind of front half of the end zone on that play. So it wasn't necessarily a dangerous shot play to where, okay, if you throw it and Devin doesn't make that catch, now all of a sudden it's another pick, another turnover, you're kind of looking worse. So I think he put it in the perfect spot, in a Penix perfect position to have. I just think that's more of the Heisman moment. And also, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. I totally agree with that. And it was just as equally amazing of a throw. It was just as impressive of a catch from Devin Culp.
Exactly.
He made such a strong play on that ball, which is just kind of what we've been waiting for from him. It really was spectacular. And, I think a lot of Husky fans are really stressed out during this game because really high stress. And we're going to talk a lot about the defense. Trust me, we're going to get there. We're talking a lot about that. But first, we're going to talk about our friends over at Game Time, because you shouldn't be stressed out like you were watching that game when you're buying tickets, just like you should be buying tickets to the last 2 Husky home games, which are coming up soon. And Game Time is the best place to do it because with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee, Gamer takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Some of the best parts about Game Time, the last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, and views from every single seat in the venue. That's right. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. The all-in prices show your total upfront so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, we got that in there. So we got a couple of good questions in here about the defense. And the first thing that I really want to say, well, first I'm gonna give my Jabbar Muhammad stat. Lars, you said that Jabbar Muhammad wasn't credited with a pick or a turnover tonight. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Do you know why that is?
Are you going to cite officiating, or are you going to cite
Nope.
the fact that he played so many different positions in the first half that it made me question where he was actually lined up?
So that was part of it, but he in every single position that he played, he was not targeted tonight. He just straight up was not targeted at all, which was kind of wild. And it's
I didn't think about that, but yeah, no, I thought he was targeted at least once in the first half, but that's the point. He was kind of moving around so much and almost forcing Caleb to say, okay, you're not throwing over here, you're not throwing. It's almost like a swing. You're not throwing in these areas, but he was never consistently in one area. And I think that's actually, we're going to talk about the defense, I'm sure, but that's also got to be a credit to Chuck Moreau to finding the best way to put your best defensive back in a position to affect the opposing passing game, whether it's getting turnovers or not.
So that actually leads really well into this question here from Will Gregg. This is, do you guys think the defensive issues are issues with scheme coaching or player execution? So probably a mix of both is the best way to put it. But the biggest thing that, I noticed, and our good friend of the show, Ben Glassmeyer, pointed out as we were texting throughout the game, and he was just inundating. He was just some absolutely fantastic text. I know Twitter saw one of them. There were many more just like it that were truly great. I love you, Ben. One thing that he kept saying was, why are all the defensive backs and linebackers playing so far off the ball? There were so many times that they were just 10, 11 yards off the line of scrimmage, and you saw it on multiple plays, and it was 3rd and long, and all Caleb Williams had to do was check it down, and USC was able to pick up a first down. That right there is a scheme issue. There are some where you can say, yeah, this is an execution issue here, like missed tackling. That's an execution issue. But more often than not, there is more than enough space for the opposing offense to operate in, which leads me to believe that it's more on the scheme than it is on the execution.
Well, the ironic part of that is how much of that was Jimmy Lake in 2021, where they were playing so far off the ball and playing so kind of conservative because they didn't want to give up the big play. So That's it's like true. You're basically forcing teams to nickel and dime. You eat up more clock. Because, I mean, you're basically saying, how do you want to die? 1 to the head or 20,000 knife cuts. It's like, well, if you bleed me out slower, maybe you'll have less possessions and you're playing like a money ball version of the game on the field, where it's like, well, we're going to have a longer drive and try and milk a little bit more so we don't have as many possessions in the game. And I thought for a second that might actually work, but it still got the over still hit, everything still hit. So it didn't really matter how they I told you it was a money game, man. It's a money game and then some.
Hey, I didn't argue with you. We had our good friend, our boss Zach Blackerby, had me do a sell me why video, which you can go check out on over on our YouTube channel as well, on why the Huskies would cover. And hey, one of the big things I cited was just this offense needed to get back on track, and Alex Grinch defense is the perfect way to do that, because I know that we're going to keep talking about the defense as well, but the offense this is what we've been saying. Like the Arizona State game looks like more of just an aberration now, because as kind of discombobulated as everything looked last week against Stanford, they still put up 42 points. And it's kind of like, yeah, you can still see all the pieces and everything was still there. And is that an excuse? Because, everything should be, and is just as the Michael Penix had the flu is a bit of an excuse. Yeah, sure. But it's also an explanation. And now Penix looked healthy, and especially early on in the game, you could see it on those first couple drives that he was just really ripping throws, and he looked like himself again. And you didn't necessarily have those same worries of like, oh man, especially the one thing that I noticed, and I feel like I pointed this out to you, maybe it was while we were prepping for a show last week. There were many times where Mike had lanes to run and pick up 5 or 6 yards with his legs, and he just didn't take it because it looked like he wasn't willing to take a hit. And a lot of that probably had something to do with the flu, right? And now you look in this game where he pulls it on the read option on 3rd and 1 and runs somebody over. He gets like the semi tush push where it's a similar formation, different look in the to get into the end zone too. And he looked more like himself again. And it looks like the execution on that side of the ball is back, because just look especially at what the running game was able to do tonight. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't have any questions about this offense moving forward.
See, here's the thing though. As much as I completely agree with everything you're saying, I can't disagree, right?
Right.
But the problem is, why was ASU an aberration? Something happened that either Brian Ward figured out or something. And when you face Kyle Whittingham in a tough defense like Utah, or Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia in the playoffs, I mean, all these teams are going to start. Yeah, you have a great offense, but when you go up against a great Oregon in the Pac-12 championship again, if you go against a solid or even better than average defense, let's be real, USC's defense has got talent, but it's just completely below average at this point, just from a production standpoint.
But in fairness, in the same light though, that Arizona State defense, numbers wise, isn't that great either. Like it was good, and they did all the right things on film. They put everything out there that you should, right? And I'm not arguing that point at all. But in the same vein, their numbers weren't necessarily stellar.
Well, they were stellar from a pass rush perspective, and that's what USC didn't do against Penix, and that's what ASU did do. So I think if you drop 3 and rush 8, drop 8 and rush 3, that would be amazing. That would be amazing.
That's that Madden Gauge 8 right there.
But if you rush 3 and drop 8 and you give Penix enough time, he's going to find somebody open. So I think teams that understand and also have the ability to pressure, which USC just flat out doesn't. Because when they did, either Washington picked up Will Nixon and Dillon Johnson both did a fantastic job in pass blocking in terms of picking up extra blitzes. And you know what? Shout out to Tybor Rogers for getting that hold, because regardless, you give up the sack or Penix potentially, you'd rather protect your quarterback and take the penalty and live to fight another down. You'd have Penix potentially get another sack and see what happens there.
No, absolutely. And that's one thing where I think having Julius Buelow back there in the middle of the defense, in the middle of the offensive line does help too. So that's something where we talked about that too as well, right? Where we looked at one of the issues that when we saw that Arizona State game was, there's a lot of pressure coming up the middle. And we didn't necessarily see that as much in this game. I remember one of your bold predictions was that Parker Brailsford was going to pancake Barry Alexander twice. While that didn't necessarily come true, that was a fantastic bold prediction, and I respect it. But that was one thing where it's having Julius Buelow in there really seemed to solidify not just because like Gearon Hatchett especially is a really good run blocker, but Julius Buelow is a much better pass blocker than him. And that showed up today. And you could see that at multiple points when there were points where USC they were crowding a lot of guys on Parker Brailsford in a similar way that Arizona State did, and were forcing him to make a decision. And Julius Buelow was a little bit better about just picking up some of those things and not letting guys get by him in that same sense. We got a great question here too. Sorry, I want to make sure because we are gonna cover this in a minute too. Callie Kane B asks, does this make Washington number 1 in the CFP? I would hope so. I don't think so. We're definitely going to talk about that more. But I want to let you finish your point first before we go into the ad read.
No, go to the ad read because there's a good spot to end it there. We'll talk about. I'll answer that question on the back end. How about that?
Perfect. I like that a lot. So with that said, we're going to give a shout out to our friends over at Prize Picks as we prep here on a Saturday night before a big, long football Sunday that is starting nice and early that I can't wait for. Do you want to get in on the action with Prize Picks? Because it's just the best and easiest way to play daily fantasy sports. It's super easy. It's the most fun you can have, winning up to 25 times your money this football season. And now you can also play during basketball season too. All you have to do is select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entries. One of the best things about Prize Picks is they even offer a reboot policy so that your entries stay in place even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. And Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with that insurance policy. Prize Picks is also really simple to play, and you can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Some of the things that make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app are quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. And I mean, hey, do you want to get on the action? Go to prizepicks.com/lockdowncollege and use code lockdowncollege for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/lockdowncollege and use code lockdowncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. All right. So we did get a really great question there. Does this make Washington #1 in the CFP? Please, Lars, start us off.
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, my thing is it might move you up to 4 beyond Florida State because they had a close 20. I say close. It was 24-7. But if you compare all 4 games of the other top 4 teams in Washington made a good case. Georgia still hung on against Missouri. Ohio State hung on against Rutgers. Washington put up the most points on offense, so I think it puts them into that 4th category for the time being. But you're basically battling Florida State for that 4th spot. It needs. I mean. If the defense did okay, they did good, right? But I think for me, it's still going to be a matter of consistency, right? I know the CFP is going to say the same thing where, okay, the Arizona State game doesn't go away, it gets watered down a little bit more, right? Because as the season goes along and you continue to win. But I think it's really going to be next week. If you beat Oregon State in Corvallis, right?
No, next week is Utah.
The week after that, sorry.
Okay.
I think that's when you would cement yourself. So there'll probably be 4. And then with a win against Utah, maybe you move up to 3 or 2. And then when you beat Oregon State, then you cement yourself as that #1 team in the country. I think that's kind of how they're going to build into this.
So I'll ask you a question because then I'll give my 2 cents because I agree. I don't think that this makes them #1, but do you think that this moves them into the top 4? Because
yes.
Like I said on a show the other day, I also said yes. And that's my thinking here. I don't know how high this is going to move them, but a ranked win on the road, I think that, Florida State, they haven't had the hardest schedule in the world. Not going to go that far. Ohio State didn't look that great today against Rutgers. Rutgers ain't great either. I know that was on the road. So, and Georgia, Lars, you called it the other day that you thought Georgia was going to struggle with Missouri a little bit. They did just that. Michigan played an easy Purdue team, so we're not really going to talk about that. And there are a whole lot of other things going on in Michigan that we won't.
How did that game turn out? By the way, do you have a final score on that one?
I don't have the final score off the top of my head.
I got
you. Appreciate it. But I do think that this moves them into the top 4 because this gives Washington 2 ranked wins. The Arizona win, as somebody in the comments said earlier too, Arizona right now, as we record this, is giving UCLA a run for their money too. Arizona's a really, really good team. Our good friend Spencer McLaughlin and I talked about it earlier in the week on Locked On Pac-12 too, that Arizona is like sneaky, really, really solid team in this conference. And they're not really getting a ton of love because they've got just a couple of losses now piled up on their schedule, but they're a really solid team and they've looked really good all year long. So that's a big win for the Huskies, or it looks bigger, I would say. And then of course the early season slate of just dominating everybody that you played. And then the top 10 win over Oregon, right? Who everyone is just in love with. And I mean, we get it. They're playing really well. And there were a couple moments today where it looked like, Cal was going to give them a fighting chance. And then that didn't happen. But this win plus the Oregon win plus the Arizona win should be enough to at the very least put them over Florida State. I don't know if it'll get them over Michigan, but it should get them into this conversation, right? Maybe the top 4 shuffles around a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Washington at 3, Michigan drops down to 4, or maybe 1 and 2 flip, right? We'll kind of see how this works out because I think that just having this second ranked win, like I said earlier in the week, is just going to be weighed pretty heavily. And I believe that it should.
No, I completely agree. So I knew I kind of answered the question a couple of times in there, as you can do, which I actually respect. I'm like, good, keep talking because But because the simple answer is yes, they will move into the number 4 spot. So right now, after this, the reason why I asked about the Michigan score, so they won 41-13 over Purdue, pretty handily, easy win. Nobody really surprised there. But I mean, FSU struggled with a 2-6 team in Pitt, so it's not out of the ordinary that teams can do that. So I think because of that, Michigan. Again, not a fan of this. Michigan 1, Georgia 2, Ohio State 3, Washington 4. And then
I can see that.
Florida State 5, Oregon 6, because I don't think Oregon's gonna jump a undefeated team until one of the undefeateds has to lose before they can jump.
Right.
I would be really surprised if an unbeaten FSU team fell to 6. They won't fall out of the top 5. They're basically trading spots with Washington.
Right. That seems like the most likely scenario here. One thing that T-Dog 425 put in the comments a little bit earlier, we've got so many of them. Thank you to everybody who's blowing up the live chat. We really appreciate it. If you got any questions, feel free to throw them in there. He wanted to give a shout out to Grady Gross, who has been really, really consistent this year. And I agree. And he said, is Grady Gross on scholarship? He's go ahead.
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't believe he is.
I was going to say, I don't either. I think it's no at the moment, but he could be going into next season, I think.
Yeah, see, that's kind of the other. I feel like DeBoer has been asked about that a couple of times this season.
He has been,
and so I think it's a matter of. So Grady Gross, at least, Grady Gross came to Washington as a walk-on, and Kalen DeBoer said he has not given out scholarships this season.
Right.
So 1 and 1 makes 2 there. That no, Grady Gross is not on scholarship. But that said, I mean, as it was razor thin, but he made that field goal. So it's
he did. Hey,
and I will say that I had almost shades of Camden Lewis there, where it's like, oh, it's creeping in, it's creeping. Oh, it's going right, it's going. Oh, it's like it's one of those. No, that's it. Yep. And you know what? And I will say the one thing that made me happy, and I put this out on Twitter early in the game. Grady Gross took Zachariah Branch out of the game in a kick return perspective. Yes, he had maybe 2 fair catches, but aside from the fair catches late, when USC was basically telling Zachariah, hey, look, don't return this, just let's start and just get the offense on the field. Just don't risk it, right. Because they had that one where it stopped it at the 5, and then of course USC still runs off, 85 or whatever yards it was 2 plays later and made it irrelevant, but. Great. That's a weapon that Washington did not have. And also, when was the last time Washington really had that kind of a weapon on special teams?
It's been a while.
It's really been a while.
So we got a good question here from Kimber Michelle.
Kalen, put that man on scholarship, please.
I think he will coming in the offseason, depending on what happens with the portal and everything else. This is does Washington clinch the Pac-12 championship game with a win over Utah next week? I don't think so. I think that makes it close. I don't think that would necessarily clinch it, because if let's say they lose the final 2 games, right? Then there's probably a whole round robin thing there of, all right, well, of 2 loss like tiebreakers and things like that, just like there was last season. So right now I'm going to say no. And I think that it might take some of the results later tonight before there can also be a final answer. Lars, do you see something different?
I was going to say, I think it could be decided next week if USC beats Oregon and there's a few other, but then again, that almost adds even more chaos if USC is able to pull that one off. And then, I mean, again, but for Washington, you control your own destiny. So it doesn't matter about who you face. It matters, do you get there? And I think for Washington, if they just keep winning, no matter how it looks, I mean, we keep saying they're going to have 1 loss, but they just keep finding a way. This team,
this is what we've been saying all year.
It really is. And, I remember saying it on the USC show going on Monday, where it's like, I know it sounds like, oh, the guy that covers Washington is going to always talk him up. It's like, no, I have no problem talking down about a team that's not very good. See me in 2021. Trust me, I promise you. But
I remember sitting next to you in the press box for that.
With that being said, this team, Rome, J-Mac, Penix, Dillon, Line, Roger, Grubb, all the pieces that came back and put this team together on both sides of the ball. Eddie coming back, I think that cannot be that can't go unnoticed. There's so many things where everybody came back this season in search of a national championship. Yes, a Pac-12 championship too, but really this team, this is why they're a national championship caliber program, because at their best, they are very, 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 very hard to stop, and they can get the stops when they need to on defense, and that's all that matters when it comes to the playoffs.
Right. So I want to get us out of here with one more question here. Kraken Hawk says, give DeBoer a clap. 22 so far. Wow. I'm going to read this word for word because, yes, respect. We love Kalen DeBoer here on this program, and whenever we get to interact with him, he's truly wonderful. Would Washington match any offer for him, no matter how high it gets money-wise? Contract extension coming soon. Yes and yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll let you get the final thought in here, because I want to say this. the first thing, there's no way with moving to the Big Ten that Washington would let Kalen DeBoer walk away. I don't think Kalen DeBoer wants to walk away either. I don't think he's actively going to be searching for other jobs. I don't even think that, if somebody comes and throws a whole bunch of money at him with an offer, that he might seriously consider it. Just from things that I know both you and I have heard about, just kind of his feelings in the program and what he wants to do here at Washington. I don't think that that's just something he wants to do. And then second of all, there's a gentleman that just got hired recently by the name of Troy Dannon, who, Lars, you and I have both interacted with him and just kind of listened to him talk just about football, about everything that he wants just to do and build with this program. I don't think he will let Kalen DeBoer escape, and that he will do anything and everything in his power to make sure that Kalen DeBoer is the coach for the Washington Huskies as long as he wants to, with whatever salary it is that he wants.
You hit the nail on the head, because here's the thing: there's 4 or 5 jobs that Kalen theoretically could go to, right? And I'm not saying I'm not thinking Texas A&M because of the unlimited funds that the 12th man have down there, but I don't think he wants the headache with the boosters and everything that goes on down in Texas. And just same thing with the University of Texas, right? With Steve Sarkisian's finding that out of Texas, where you can win and you can do all this, but the amount of stuff that you got to do, the headaches and everything that comes with it, it's just not who DeBoer wants to be. That's number one. Number two, you got to go to Michigan. I don't think, since with the move to the Big Ten, I think that takes those Big Ten schools out of the equation. If they didn't move to the Big Ten, we are having a completely different conversation here. Yep. So that takes that out of the way. Alabama, Nick Saban's going to be there until he dies. So that one comes out of the way. Clemson, I don't see Kalen going across the country to replace Dabo, no matter how much.
The ACC is a step down.
Exactly. But Clemson would be the marquee program of that situation. And I just don't think Kalen wants to go across the country. So when you think about it more and more, and Alexis is going to enroll in the fall. So I would be very surprised at this point if DeBoer ever lifts a finger to say, you know what, I don't even know if he would consider the call. His agent might use it for leverage, but I don't think he would even consider actually taking that interview. Now, his assistants are a different story, just because the more money other teams throw at you with bigger job titles, that's a different story.
Exactly. There's one other one here that we didn't mention, but again, I really don't think that it matters for a couple of reasons, and that's USC. USC, can they throw all the money at him? Sure. Is there a lot of added stress that I don't think Kalen DeBoer wants that comes with that job? Also, yes. And I think that, because you mentioned his daughter Alexis, who is enrolling to play softball in the fall, I think that that's a really big part of this, because, and especially when you think about USC, which is some people think is the biggest threat here, they don't have a softball program. And that's something that does need to be, I think, considered, because it feels like Kalen DeBoer just kind of wants to have his family settled in one place and not be consistently moving back and forth for something like that.
Yeah, no, Kalen's like Chris Peterson, only even more of a dad. Not that, again, that's not a shot at Peterson, but it's just like,
he's got that big dad energy.
Exactly. Simply Seattle, make that t-shirt, please. Come on. I guarantee you so many people would buy that. But yeah, it's just Chris Peterson has not come back to the sport. I mean, he's been an analyst. He does things around the sport, but he's not coming back to coaching because he doesn't want to. Doesn't have to. Right. Kalen doesn't have to go anywhere. He can retire at Washington if he wants. There's no reason. The only place Kalen's going is the NFL, and he just doesn't strike me as an NFL kind of guy. But if he did, if he did, that's still 5 years after Alexis graduates.
No, absolutely. That's my thing, where I just don't see him as an NFL guy. Not in terms of I don't think he can do it. It just kind of doesn't feel like his lane of what he wants to do. And with that, I feel like that's a great place to wrap this one up. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. And thank you to all the viewers. This has been the best comment section we've seen so far on one of these. So thank you so much for all that. It looks like it's also been the most watched so far, just in terms of what we can see here on our end numbers wise. So thank you to everybody who's tuned into this. Seriously, thank you so much. It means a lot to us, and it's so helpful for us as we try to continue to grow the show. And if this is your first time here, hey, welcome. We'd love to have you here. And if you want to just keep up with us and everything that we're doing, please feel free to subscribe to the show.
Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington.
Edit that out in post. That was really fun. But thank you so much. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We are there. We are everywhere. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Monday.